make my astrology videos about once every week or so. So to make this all, we're kind of getting ahead of ourselves if we make this about Mars retrograde, but just keep in mind that this is going to be territory that is going to be crossed over again once Mars goes retrograde. And Mars is takes a long time for these Mars retrogrades. So Mars is going to spend a long time in Leo, and when Mars is retrograding, eventually Pluto is going to be in Aquarius, right? So Mars is going to go retrograde, and then Mars is going to oppose Pluto in Aquarius, and so we're going to get this continuation of the Mars Pluto dynamics that have been creating a kind of intensity leading up to this election, and then that's going to just carry on over into January of next year, but now with the Mars Pluto happening between Leo and Aquarius rather than Cancer and Capricorn. We're getting all the way into January, a few months out. But for just at the very beginning of this transit, I would like to direct your attention to the fact that we've also had another interesting ingress taking place, which is Mercury. As of November 3rd, Mercury has ingressed into Sagittarius, and now, the day of recording this, November 4th, there is a trine between Mercury in Sagittarius and Mars in Leo, two planets which have just recently changed signs, hitting each other with a trine aspect. And that going in here, I thought the best thing to do would be to just do a 12-sign horoscope video about this astrology, but on in a more of a short term. We're not going all the way into January of next year right now. Although, it is, whatever, it's winter time. That is kind of on our mind. We are, and as astrologers, we are having an eye to the future, looking forward to what may be on our mind at the turn of the new year, right? So, with all this in mind, Mars in Leo and Mercury in Sagittarius, 12-sign horoscope, starting with Aries. I will put Aries on the ascendant here. So with Aries on the ascendant, that puts Mars in the 5th house, the house that typically has to do with children, as well as sport and play, things which are fun and not serious. I would basically, if you are a parent, I would expect this to be a sign that your children may be more obnoxious than usual during this transit. They may be loud, they may be playful and energetic, but unruly. And their Mercury in the 9th house has to do with either long distance travel or higher learning, higher education. It could also have to do with, there's a certain archetypal pattern that goes with a kind of like college frat boy, kind of like having fun, but in a kind of a rough and tumble sport way. But you're also maybe going on a trip. But then the thing is, there's also, keep in mind, there's all these wars going on, and there could be, but there's something diplomatic negotiating about Mercury, but it's in this trine to Mars, the warlike planet, and there's some kind of like, you got to have you got your young kind of puer, the little adolescent who wants to be the hero, but you need to get some higher ideals guiding these rowdy adolescents. You gotta sort of give them some principles to guide, so they're not just like out there causing trouble, basically, right? So those are some, and whether that is, you could be taking this to individuate from your own inner adolescent who just wants to play and cause trouble, and try to put that playful spirit to work in a more productive way that incorporates maybe some higher ideals with that Mercury in your ninth house. For Taurus, the Mars in Leo is going to be in your fourth house of home and family, which may indicate a certain kind of tension, either to do with kind of like ancestral baggage, old skeletons that are in the closet, could be kind of like unearthing old stuff you haven't looked at that's been kind of buried, or things from the past, or certain long-running family conflicts or tensions, territorial disputes, those kinds of things. And meanwhile, Mercury is in the 8th house, which is the house that stands for things like debt and dependency. Also, 8th house is a significant thing for crime. So there may be, I would say, my astrological recommendation is to stay vigilant against tricksters and swindlers, right? That Mercury may be charming, may know how to sweet talk you, but make sure Mercury's just not after the wallet. And you got to understand that you got Venus and Jupiter in an opposition as well, right? Jupiter in Gemini being opposed by Venus and Mercury in Sagittarius. And this being Jupiter in your second house, your house of your money, your belongings, your material possessions. And, there could be a charming swindler out to rip you off, or like a gold digger or something like that. And you just have to, be vigilant that this charming person isn't just laying the riz off on you to like get their hands in the purse strings. Or to come up with some kind of a convincing swindle or con artistry, and you're just being the generous. You don't want to be overly generous with people who are out to rip you off, basically. And I've just saved you a lot of money. If you've listened to this, you can thank me later. With the third house of Gemini, you have Mars in Leo has just ingressed into your third house, which rules siblings, neighbors, aunts and uncles, things like that. And you're looking into be careful about potential conflicts with neighbors. Maybe with Mercury is in the 7th house, which has to do with either partners, but as well as enemies. So there could be a kind of a danger for an open conflict. However, there's at least with Mercury in the 7th, there's a potential for negotiation, diplomatic negotiation, rather than just like all-out hostility. But mind you, Mercury is going to go retrograde later on, and so the negotiations may not be final. They may only be temporary negotiations, which will have to be gone back over on later. And be careful for, like disputes with either siblings or people in the neighborhood, basically, in the local area, with that Mars in the 3rd. If we move on to Cancer, we have Mars in the 2nd house, which has to do with your resources, your wealth, and Mars is in this trine to a Mercury in your 6th house, and the 6th house has to do with your health. It has to do with delegating tasks to other people, or hiring yourself out as a helper, perhaps, depending on what's going on in your life circumstance. There could be, with Mars recently ingressing to the 2nd house, you could be feeling this kind of push, a martial push to make money, and you could be motivated to hire yourself out to the lowest kinds of jobs. Anything will put some money in the bank to keep you going, and you're gonna put some elbow grease into it, basically, or else you're going to be maybe another person is going to be hiring out, trying to get some helpers to help them out, but you're going to be feeling it in the pocketbooks, and you're going to be maybe you're going to feeling maybe stingy. You don't want to pay these people as much as they're asking. You may be cranky about spending your money, but you need the help, so you don't have a choice. You're going to have to hire some help because otherwise you're overloaded, you're overwhelmed, you're going to need some hired hands to help you with the big job ahead. And you're going to have to either spend the money on it, or else you're going to have to be the hired hand and put the elbow grease in it, and maybe there's some money in it for you. That's kind of what I'm looking at here, right? But notice that Jupiter is in the 12th house and Mercury's going to retrograde. So be careful you're getting your financial remuneration and you're not getting ripped off, basically, right? Make sure that you got it in writing, that you got the contract signed. This isn't, you're getting your, you're getting it in. Yeah, you know what I'm saying? Okay. So if we move on, now, Leo. Okay, so Leo, you've got Mars has just ingressed into your first house, and Mercury is in the 5th house. Now, with Mars in the first house, there's a sense of tension and conflict, and as a Leo, you have a tendency to take things personally. You have a tendency to make it all about you. And in some way, maybe you're right. Maybe you are the protagonist, the hero, the main character in your own life. And you have the opportunity to take responsibility for the role you play in your life. However, that could also mean hostility that is directed towards you personally, and you entering into a certain period of time where you feel like you have to either attack or defend yourself. And it's all very personal with Mars in the first house. However, with Mercury in the 5th house, there is and Venus in the 5th house. Now, in Hellenistic astrology, Venus has her joy in the 5th house. So at the time that eventually Venus is going to go into Capricorn. Venus only has 7 degrees left to go in Sagittarius, but at the time of making this video, Venus is in a well-dignified position, which helps to maybe take a bit of the edge off of this. With Venus and Mercury in your 5th, there's a sort of a playful quality, a charming quality, and so that you may be able to at least handle the conflicts with a degree of charisma, or a degree of not taking things so seriously, being a bit playful with it. However, Mercury is going to go retrograde in this house later, and the shadow of this is maybe just being immature or not taking things seriously. And then, which reminds me, Saturn is in the 8th house, Pisces, going to be squaring Mercury, so there's going to be some kind of a tension between the puer senex, the playful child who takes things not seriously, and the cranky old man who takes things overly seriously. And you are going to be mitigating these tensions, but the Mars dynamic is you're going to feel there's more of a risk of you being a bratty child and kind of brushing off the responsibility rather than integrating the lesson of the senex, the old man, because as the chart shows, senex is in the Saturn senex archetype in the 8th house, a blind spot, an area of unconsciousness, right? So the problem is trying to integrate something which you are is happening in a certain area where you may be not aware of it, maybe even projecting it onto other people. For Virgo, Mars is in the 12th house, a house that traditionally signifies things like prisons, hospitals. And Mars is the warrior. So we have the image of an exiled warrior, a fighter who is imprisoned, who is isolated, who is not in a direct conflict, not in a direct battle, but instead is kind of on the sidelines, on the periphery, in the liminal spaces. The 12th house is sometimes associated with dreams and the unconscious. Also, another subterranean kind of signification is Mercury in the 4th house, to do with the roots of the chart, the ancestral lineage, the home and the family. It could be this for Virgo. This could have less to do with things that are happening out in the open and more to do with messages that come from dreams or a time to commune with the ancestral spirits, or to rather than making it about the ancestors, it could be to listen to the spirit of the territory or of the earth, of the natural environment where you live, the actual physical place where you have set your roots down on and call your home. And of course, taking consideration, we're going out to the World Wide Web here. There's all sorts of conflicts around the disputes over land and territory, and I'm in in a colonial country, on indigenous land that was taken over by colonizers, and there's all sorts of disputes about empires that want to reconstitute themselves, to their territorial disputes all over the earth, right? And for us, for Virgo, with the Mars in the 12th, this may not be like they are charging out to battle with the AK-47 in hand. This may be something that is only registering at in a subconscious level of the collective stresses, collective pressures, or that they have their own warrior spirit that has been exiled because for the sake of living in a civilized social democracy, we're not going to go out to war, we're not going to go out to battle, but nonetheless, something about these global conflicts are tickling our ancestral karma, our ancestral baggage, the karma of the land that we're on, and it's a time where we may just journal about it and not I think it's more of an introverted, introspective time for Virgo. For Libra, Mars is in the 11th house, which has to do with large groups, organizations, perhaps even government institutions. And Libra may be involved with the different tensions and conflicts in the world at a more of an organizational level, but there's inherent problems with the structural organization of society that are coming to a point that are highlighted around the stresses of the election, basically. And Mercury in the 3rd house and Venus there is at least a sign that you're going to have an opportunity for diplomatic negotiations, to sort things out. Although keep in mind, we're going to have a Mercury retrograde, so this is not going to be finalized. This is going to be something that may take many revisions, but it's something to take in consideration anyways. It's something that's going to be active in terms of open communications. There's also at a more, rather than just being on the level of organizing at a governmental structural level, for other people it could have to do with making agreements and negotiating things with your neighbors, your community, neighborhood disputes, civic engagement, that kind of thing. It was the general theme for Libra. Note that domicile lord of Libra is Venus, which is also sharing this third house with Mercury. So there is going to be a very active communication time for Libra, a very active organizing time, but nothing's going to be final. Everything's going to be changing. Everything's going to be up in the air. It may feel kind of flaky, but you just have to roll with it. Okay? And this has to do with the upcoming Mercury retrograde. For Scorpio risings, the Mars in Leo is taking place in the 10th house, which has to do with career and public image. And there could be some kind of a sense of tension or conflict around competing for the spotlight. Because, I mean, if you're doing something it's a competitive world, right? It's a competitive world out there. People don't have much attention span anymore. So there's the attention economy has become fiercely competitive. If you're doing a passion project, where if you're doing something which is maybe doesn't make money but you find it interesting, chances are there are going to be a million other jerks who have the same idea in mind, and you have to outcompete every one of these bozos by, but so you don't want to sacrifice your integrity just for the sake of feeling like you have to compete for the spotlight, basically, right? But if you also look at what's happening with Mercury having recently ingressed into your second house, you may be feeling the need to make some revisions around your money making, your income. And with that Mars Mercury trine, there could be this sort of push to get your entrepreneurial hustle back on track, to make that money, to compete for the spotlight, for superstardom. But Mercury's going to go retrograde, and you may just you may have to go over, don't make any firm commitments to a plan of attack right now, because you may have to make revisions on them, right? So that, for Scorpio rising, that's the prognosis. For Sagittarius rising, Mars is in your 9th house, which has to do with the higher ideals and principles which guide you in life. It could also do with higher learning, to going to school, education, advancing there could be some sort of, if you're in a area of higher learning, there could be some kind of conflict. There could be a disagreement, political tensions with professors. There could be a difficult test or a difficult lesson that you're not getting, right? There could be a conflict. You could find yourself in a position with Mercury in the first house, with Venus in the first house. You're in a position where you have the opportunity to say something. You have the opportunity to communicate, to be heard, to contribute to the conversation. But there is some inherent conflict around the guiding principles, the guiding philosophy, which is leading your course of action, which is guiding your philosophy in life. And you are... you have an opportunity to speak about it, to talk about it openly, to get it out there on the table. But that doesn't mean that it's just going to be something everyone's going to agree with, or that there could be some sort of, with the upcoming Mercury retrograde, there could be a time of revisioning what your ideals and principles that guide you in life are all about. And, but there's a certain kind of friction or tension around it. For Capricorn, Mars in the 8th house. This is a house to do with dependency, to do with obligations and debts to other people, the shared baggage of the group, right? And with Mars, usually has to do with cutting, usually has to do with a kind of yangi individuating. And there's this desire to cut the ties that bind, and to release yourself from things which are no longer serving you. However, you also have to consider that this could also be like a bad habit that you are, you're feeling the need to purify yourself of various toxic bad habits. Or it could be like the kind of thing that like you have to be careful of the peer pressure of the bad habits that just go with the environment that you're in, right? Like if you are, you don't smoke cigarettes, but you're hanging out with a bunch of other people that do, and you always, you're like, okay, I just get a drag, and you're like, I'm only a social smoker or something. There could be something like that, right? Where it's not, there's something indicative to what you're involved in, or that you have it's going to be like the obligation to, like, what if you get drafted into the war or something like that, but that's not your personal opinion or your choice or your politics, but you have some obligation to some larger structure that is intent on war or something like that, right? Or I don't know. There's some kind of thing with Mars. It's going to be in a retrograde, so there's going to be a going back and forth, and you're also going to get this Pluto. Pluto's going to go in Aquarius, and then we're going to be having this kind of like purification, or this kind of like, there's this eruption, like a volcano of stuff that just needs to get released, that needs to get out of there, kind of thing, right? We've been going through this before the ingress, and now with eighth house, it's sort of like eighth house is like the house of death. It's time to let the old leaves die and decompose and turn into nutrients. It's time for a kind of a Negredo, maybe even, right? And with that in mind, you've got Mercury having recently ingressed into the 12th house, which is the house of traditionally associated with prisons, with exile, and you've got Mercury there and Venus there, and it kind of like the kinds of murky secret things, which are not, they're kind of like stewing in this kind of like dark chamber, and in a trine to this Mars, which, it's like this kind of like collective, habitual, you're obligated into this thing, and you maybe disagree with it, but you don't have the opportunity to voice any disapproval. You don't have the opportunity to come out and openly. So you have to take your communicator and you have to write a secret journal. You have to. There are certain things which, it's not because they're not true. They're just things that you have to. It's not the time to be openly engaging, and sometimes you just have to like shut up and go along with it, even if you disagree. But there's this effort. If you want to separate yourself from these obligations, or this collective baggage, or this kind of like you're just stuck in this thing that you don't really have a choice in. There's this you kind of want to get out of there, but you're not going to plan this as some open thing. You're going to have to like you're going to be like the prisoner who makes his like getaway escape plan in a kind of in secret, right? So that the jail warden doesn't know you're planning to make a getaway, basically, right? That's kind of the vibe with this 8th house, 12th house thing going on, right? But you also don't want to, once you're out of the slammer, you don't want the former mob boss coming to get the hitman out after you to collect your unpaid debts, right? With the 8th house, it could be like the unpaid debt and the muscle that of like the debt collectors are on your ass, and you got to pay them off, right? So, I mean, there's all sorts of things that could be happening with this one, which brings us to Aquarius. You've got Mars in the 7th house, which has to do either with partners or with enemies. And with the 7th house, it's an angular house. So there could be something going on where there is some sort of conflict or tension that you're feeling very acutely. It should just be, and if it hasn't hit you yet, over the Mars retrograde period, which is Mars is going to be in Leo for quite a long time, there's going to be some kind of conflict which is going to really be grinding your gears. I'm sorry this is maybe not as positive as some of the other ones, but The other thing is that Mercury has recently ingressed into Sagittarius, your 11th house, so that when Venus is there too, so that you could have some be playing a role in a larger group or a larger community, and having some kind of amicable association with a kind of a larger social structure or larger organizational structure. But that could also there could also be like we're heading into a time with all these wars or all these political conflicts. And with that Mars in your 7th, you could be feeling that very acutely as some sort of open hostility from an enemy. But the upside is that you've also got help from your friends. In the final sign of the zodiac in this sequence is Pisces. And Pisces, you have Mars entering your 6th house, which traditionally has to do with health, as well as fighting, as well as certain forms of work. And there is, again, I would be careful. This is a warning. Mars has its joy in the 6th. So it's a place where Mars is going to do very Marsy stuff. Mars is the god of war. Mars wants to fight. Mars has to do with the body and physical injuries or health and wellness. I mean, if you want to use this positively, it could be a good time to work out at the gym, get on an exercise routine, make dietary changes, all that. I'm not a health and wellness guy, but with Mars in your 6th, or it could also be be prepared if you have pets, that there could be veterinary issues around this one. There's also, with Mercury and Venus in Sagittarius, your 10th house, there could be some kind of communication publicly or around your work, your career. But there's going to be a Mercury retrograde. So there's going to be, I would say, be careful about especially with, you got Jupiter in the 4th house opposing Venus and Mercury in your 10th house. And Jupiter is, of course, the planet of generosity. And there may be a kind of risk of oversharing, over communicating in the public sphere, of saying too much, of posting too much. And with Mercury retrograde, there could be a problem where you say too much and then you have to wind it back. Like, should I have said that? Maybe I went overboard, right? And with Mars in the 6th, there is a danger that you say too much and you start a fight, you start a conflict. So be careful what you say so that you don't start any open fights or battles or something like that. And, at the same time, a good time to be mindful of your health. But I'm not here to be judgmental about it. I'm not a wellness guru or anything. I'm just saying that it may be something to pay attention to with this transit. Thanks for watching. That's it for today. This is my first time recording a video with this kind of software. So let's see how this works. It's an experiment.